Okay, welcome back. I'm gonna, let's see, turn off video for, there we go. So I'm gonna turn my own video off here in a moment and turn it all over to Caitie. But I'm Tracy with Habitat for Humanity, and this is Caitie, and her videographer there is Michaela, if you hear the person talking on the other side of the screen. And they lead about 2 women build sessions a month for us. So this one is all about how to build a raised garden bed. So I will stop talking and turn it over to Caitie.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody. By everybody, I mean all 2 of you for being here tonight. We are going to learn how to build a raised bed tonight. So I kind of picked a pretty straightforward, simple approach. But I'm going to go through some ways that you can change that and add on to it and kind of put your own style or preference to the garden bed. And I am going to be sticking mostly to the construction of the garden bed and like what you might want to think about. I'm not going to get into like all of the gardening and how to get your soil right. Like that's a whole workshop on its own and probably not to be led by me. I'm not the garden pro, but we did have a earlier workshop on gardening led by our friend Hannah at Large Farms. So if we have access to that recording, you could look back at that for more garden related info. Also just YouTube it. There's tons of info about like how to get good soil and get the right setup for like the plants and the location of the garden bed. So I'm going to go into that a little bit, but mostly talking about the carpentry behind it, the construction, actual building of the bed. So I guess we'll just jump right in. I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about why would we make a garden bed? Of course, we could just make it because we like the look of a raised bed. We want to add some kind of variety to our yard or to our, garden. But they are also very practical for a couple of other reasons. One is if you are working in an area that has really rocky or clayey soil and your plants just really aren't growing, it's really hard to dig a hole or kind of get the right soil, and your plants aren't doing so good. The benefit of the raised bed is you can put that right on top and fill in, however tall you want to make it with soil, and it can grow in your existing yard. You don't have to move houses. Also, if you're in an area that has a lot of established roots, so this would be like big trees, or maybe you took out an old garden and there's a lot of kind of remaining roots, this would be another great time to put the bed right on top of that area, fill it with your own soil, and you'll be good to go. The other one is if you have like a temporary living situation. So if you don't want all of your plants in the ground, you could put them in this, even a smaller box or one that has a closed-in bottom that you could transport or easily take apart and reset up somewhere. So that's kind of some good scenarios to be thinking about if this would be a good fit for you or not. Yeah. Okay, so next, I'll talk a little bit about the model that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be building a bed that's 4 feet by 8 feet long. So 8 feet long ways, 4 feet across. This is a pretty standard size, and there's a couple of reasons. The 4 foot across is great for accessibility in terms of that's about how far you can reach from either side. So you can reach into the middle, you can walk around to the other side and reach. You don't want to set yourself up where you can't reach stuff that's in your bed. So anything more than 4 feet is going to be a little bit more difficult to work with. And if you can't work in your bed, you're not going to maintain it. So it's better to just make it a size that everybody would be able to have access to. And then the lengthwise, this one has it's kind of up to you. I picked 8 feet because that's a common size of lumber. So if I get an 8 foot board and make it 8 feet long, then I don't really have to make a lot of cuts. It's a standard size, so I'm not wasting any material. You can make it 12 feet long. You can make it the whole length of your fence line if you wanted to. you would just need a lot more wood. So that one you can, yeah, you can play with that and fit it to your size. But it is a good thing to think about in terms of what lumber you're going to need. The 8-foot length and 4-foot wide, you can do it all with 8-foot boards. So that's really nice. They're the shortest length pretty much that you'll find at like Home Depot or Lowe's. So they're easier to transport and carry, and you can make less cuts. So that's my thought process behind the size. Of course, totally up to whoever's doing it. Next, I'll talk about, let's see. I'll save that for later. We're gonna see plenty of the boards. Okay, so the other common or the other thing that you need to figure out in terms of what material you want to use for your project is if you should use pressure treated wood or not. So I chose not to use pressure treated wood. So I'm using regular 2x4 that looks like this. This is your standard board. And then pressure treated lumber has this kind of greenish color. I don't know if you can see that.
Can you compare them?
Yeah,
together?
can you flip your phone the other way too?
Oh yeah.
So this kind of green color, this is from the chemicals that they put in the board. So the pressure treated is called that because they put chemical treatment in it, and the purpose of that is to make it last longer in the elements. So in your water, sun, outdoors. The pressure treated wood this is still pressure treated, but this side has been face down, so it's a little bit faded already. So the benefit of that is it lasts longer. The downside for a garden bed is that those chemicals can get into the soil and start to mess with your plants and how they're growing. So typically, if it was outside, like a deck or a porch or a ramp, stairs, that would be pressure treated wood, no question. Since this is something that is going to be trying to grow things out of it, I chose to go with the regular wood. And so you'll still get, 5 to 10 years with, maybe 5 to 8 with regular lumber. The pressure treated, you would get longer, but it still doesn't last forever. So, and it is also more expensive, the pressure treated wood. So I was watching this one video and they said basically that you could build a raised bed with regular lumber twice and it would still cost less than using all pressure treated lumber too. So that's a good model if you're not sure which to choose. And that also is a preference thing. I also saw a video where they did the bottom board was pressure treated. Well, this might make more sense, but we're going to be building a bed that looks like this, 2 layers. So it's going to be 1 layer here and another layer of lumber on top. So one video I saw, they did the bottom layer pressure treated. That's the layer that's going to be sitting on the ground. And then the top layer, they just did regular lumber. And their thought process was, the one that's on the ground will hold up better. And they were growing something that had pretty shallow roots. So, maybe the soil that it was coming into contact with wouldn't be as affected by the chemicals. So some of this is going to be project dependent, but in theory, either one would be okay to use depending on, your preference and such. Any questions on that stuff before we keep going? Just feel free to either raise hand or chat, or Tracy can unmute you if you do have a question.
Yeah, or you can unmute yourselves. There's still only 2 people in here. So just if you have a question, feel free to shout it out. Caitie will take breaks and ask too.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to keep rolling and then, just ping in if you have questions. So I chose to do a bed that is going to be using 2x6s. And briefly, the different lumbers, it has a nominal name, which is what we call it, like a 2x4, 2x6, 2x8, 2x10, and 2x12. So those are all the possible kind of solutions or varieties within lumber. And that just means that it's 2 inches wide, which is actually, it measures 1.5 inches for the 2x4 and then 3.5. So it's called a 2x4. It's actually 1.5 by 3.5. Same thing for the 2x6. The 2 actually means it's 1.5, and the 6 is 5.5. And so the second number is just talking about how tall the board is. So if you wanted thicker boards, you could go with the 2x10 and maybe do 2 layers. If you want kind of smaller boards, you could do a 2x6 and do 3 or 4 layers. I chose a 2x6 just because I wanted to show the different layers. You could have done a 2x12 and it would have been the same size, but just one board. So there's some variety within that too. And I think that we should just go ahead and get started, because when we see the boards, it'll be easier than me trying to explain it. All right, so what I got is my 2x6s. And these long boards, this is my 2x6 by 8 feet long. So length to length, I'm looking at 8 feet all the way down. So this is going to be 1 layer of my bed. And since it's already 8 feet, this is one of the benefits of already getting the lumber to size. I don't need to make any cuts on that. So this is a fairly simple process. My second board is going to go right on top of this next layer, but we're going to put our bottom layer together first. You can also go to wherever you get your wood from, whether that be Home Depot or Lowe's. You can, if you already know the size that you need your boards cut, you can get them cut there. So if I know one of my boards is going to be 4 feet, I can take it to the people who work at the store and say, hey, can you cut my boards at 4 feet? And then you can bring it all home and just assemble it in place. So you do also want to consider if you're going to be building your bed in place, or if you're it's going to be light enough that you and somebody else can pick it up and move it. So think about that before you start attaching everything together. Okay. All right, so my first 8-foot board is right here, and then my 4 foots are going to go in between. So one thing to one thing to do before we start putting all our boards together is figure out how we want to orient them. And what I mean by that is, do I want it this way? Do I want it flipped this way? And the way that we want to determine that is based on if there's any defects in the wood. So what I mean by that is, if I'm looking down and I see that it's kind of curved, if it's bowing out, it's bowing in, it's going to be really hard to see that on the board, but let's draw this one. So what I mean by bow is, if this is my board running 8 feet long, a bow would be like this, right? So this is bow. And then if I have my board standing up tall, like it is right here, standing up height-wise, it's the same shape that we're looking for, but it would be called either a cup, which would be this cup, or a crown. So basically, if it's bent or misshaped in any of those ways, we want to look out for that. So if it has a crown on it, I want that side up. So basically, if there's anything that's like this, it would sag over time. It would go down. If I start it with the cup facing up, then it's going to be more likely to just weaken my structure over time. I don't know if that totally makes sense. But same thing for a bow. If it's bowing, I want it to be, let's see, how do I explain this? We're going to be filling this with soil, which is going to push our boards out. So if there's a bow, I want this to be cupped in facing inwards in my bed. So that soil will straighten it over time, as opposed to starting with a cup like this and my soil kind of further weakening that. Does that make sense? Hopefully that's kind of like technical, probably too technical for a bed, but this is important if you're going to be going up a few levels. So the higher up you go, the more soil you're putting in it and the more weight that's in it. So if you get high enough, you know, you're going to need to start reinforcing your beds with some additional supports. This one's only 2 layers high, which is not enough to need to worry about that. All right, so I already checked for this board, and the way that you check for these, that would be helpful, is if you hold your board and I look straight down it, I'm looking down this end here, I'm looking for any kind of cup. Sometimes you really can't tell, and if you can't tell, then it doesn't matter. It's not a big enough thing to worry about. Same thing, I'll check on these sides. I see a slight bow in this, so I'm going to put that towards my inside. And then basically we're making a box. So I'm going to start assembling these all together like this. You do want to make sure that if you're building it in place that you've already prepped your area, meaning kind of cleared it out, and it's relatively level. It does not have to be perfect. You know, we're not building a house. This isn't our foundation or anything, but just so it wears even and everything's stable, you want to start level as much as possible. Okay, so when we build our box, sounds pretty straightforward, but there is a few things that you want to think about in this, and part of that is what our corners will look like. So the way I have it set up now, I have my 2 8-foot boards on the outside and my 2 4-foot boards on the inside. That's how we want to do it. We want to make sure that it's consistent between the 2 ends. So if I put this board like this, you zoom in on that corner, right? So my 4-foot board in between my 2 8-footers, that's great. But if I come down here and now my 4-foot board is on the outside, then my last corner isn't going to match up. So make sure we're looking at that while we're putting it together. The other reason I chose to do this is because I'm going to do a little rail on top. And if I put my 4-footer on the outside, then my overall length of this is going to be over 8 foot. So then I would need to get a 10-foot board as the next size. So I want to avoid that. So I'm going to make sure that my longest point is 8 foot, which means my 4-footers go in between. Does all that make sense? Let me know if I'm talking too fast or anything. Getting kind of excited. Okay. All right. So now that we got kind of all that squared away, no pun intended, we will get to squaring in a minute. Then we're going to start assembling. So I'm not on a totally level surface here, which is okay. We do want to make sure that this board is flush. So by flush, I mean that we're running in the same plane. Right now I got a little bump, so I'm going to need to hold this board up so that it's flat when I run across. Okay, so now to talk about how to assemble it. I would recommend using screws for this. So screws have, you know, a spiral in them. That's going to make it less likely to pull apart over time. If you use a nail and there's a bunch of weight in it, it can just kind of push those nails right out. There's not a whole lot holding it in. So we're gonna use screws. So I got exterior wood screws, 3 inches long. So you can check this box out. Kayla's gonna get you a foot, a view of that. Hello. Okay, so make sure you get exterior screws. That's gonna make sure that they don't rust when they're outside and exposed to weather. And I got the star tipped, which actually just looks like a star, kind of like a 6-pointed star. That's a lot easier to drive in with the drill, as opposed to a Phillips head, which is just the cross. That's kind of hard to drive it in. So exterior screws, and I got 3.5 or 3 inches. You want to make sure that it's got enough bite into this other board. So I already know that this is 1.5 inches. I want to make sure I'm going into this a good amount. So this gives me 1.5 inches in to my board. All right. The other thing you can do to help during assembly is pre-drill where you're going to screw, and this will help you drive the screws in and also make sure your wood doesn't split. You don't have to do this, but it does make it a little bit easier. So I got a little bit that helps with this. It's called a countersink bit. So it's got this small part is to drill a hole, and then this carves out a spot that my screw head goes, and that's going to make sure that my screw head goes all the way into the wood and doesn't crack it. And the way that we would use this is I'm just attached here into my driver. You do need a driver to do this. It would be really, really hard to do by hand. So like with the screwdriver, probably not efficient. So you can buy one of these or rent one from Tacoma Tool Library. And then we're going to go ahead and drill kind of equidistant. This part isn't super scientific, but basically for a board that's this size, which is my 2x6, I'm going to put 3 screws in. So you could start with 1 in the middle. Go ahead and drill that, and this is what it looks like after. So you can see where the smaller part went, and then the bigger hole, that's where my screw head is going to go into. Yeah, satisfying. So 1 in the middle, and then kind of equidistant again. Again, no perfect science on this. You can mark it out if you want it to look like super, super clean. Basically, we don't want to get too close to the edge to split our wood, and we want to make sure we're within this 1.5 inches because that's where my screw is going to go through to my other board. So if you pre-drill way over here, you're not actually going to hit anything when we go to assemble it. All right, so now I got both my sides pre-drilled. I'm gonna come on over here. Can you see it from there? Mm-hmm. All right, so the screws that you buy will come with a bit that matches up, so that's super handy. And then we're gonna start assembling our first layer. All right, so like I said before, we want this to be flush, so I'm gonna hold this up a little bit, basically to make sure that my tops here are flush and my end is flush. So get my end set first. And then top down. And then go ahead and drive my screws in. So you see how that went in nice and easy, and no splitting of my wood, and you want your screw all the way buried. That's a little bit too deep, but we don't want our screw head sticking out. So that's pretty good right there. And then I got my first corner set. So this is going to be basically the same for each corner, but I'm going to go ahead and do the other side as well. Just slightly.
Do you want me to move that?
Okay, so that is one layer. Well, my back. All right, so then I can do, how did I see? My next layer, I'm gonna attach one side. You can basically build both of these. You could build two boxes totally separate and then just put the next one on top. I'm gonna kind of do that. My next box would go same way. Screwing in my sides.
It's bowed.
Okay.
This one's bowed. Or cup thing.
What?
Cup.
Okay, I caught the bow on this board.
Just like my arm.
Maybe that would be a good demo. Do you want to show? Do you think you'd be able to see under the board?
Yeah, and you could also, if you flipped it over, it's easier to tell because then like you can.
So I don't know if you guys can see or hear what Michaela's saying.
Yeah.
But basically, this board is kind of rocking on the ground, which is a good indication that there's a bow.
Yeah. I mean, that was just what I saw was that it was rocking.
Yeah. So when I put this side up, there's a gap, which means I want my,
You can tell that there's a gap. Probably not.
I want my gap down and my bow side up. Good call. Why we keep it around. Same thing on this side. I'm not pre-drilling this one, but you can just start your screws. That's sometimes easier, so you have two hands or one hand to mess around with the board, getting it where you want it. Okay, so same thing. Flush on my top. All right. And then fast forward to me getting the other sides of this in. All right. So
Cool.
if I got the rest of this just goes the same. I'm going to try not to show all of that for the video because this will be about another 30 minutes of me putting in screws. But essentially, when we have our two boxes, we're going to stack them on top of each other. And this is more or less what it looks like. And like I started to say in the beginning, this is where you have a lot of variety of what you can do. So this look is, you know, two boards, 6 inches. You could do 2x8s and it would be a little bit taller. You could do a 2x12 and it would just be this height by itself. Then you'd only be building one box, which is kind of fun. You could also make this taller. So you could make it, you know, to a height where you could work at it sitting down or standing up. The one thing is that you would need to think about is just how much soil is going to be going into it. So if it's a lot of soil, you're going to be having more weight pressing out on your walls. If that is happening, you would need to add some extra supports, and I can talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to show you guys how to do some corner supports right now. So this is a 2x4 that I just ripped down. So I cut it in half lengthwise just so I could get some more pieces out of it. But basically I'm going to use this block to put in my corners. And I cut these a little bit short just so I would have a little bit of play in where I put it. But basically what this is going to do is help tie my 2 layers together and reinforce my corners so it's not, you know, wiggling and wobbling at my corners as much. So if you were going to do a few more layers, you could add some more supports like this into your corners, or just a 2x4. So actually the full length, not cut. You could add this into the middle, and that would help your walls not move as much over time. Yeah, so corner support, I'm just gonna go in the corner. And what we're gonna wanna do is, I'm gonna do mine, I think at the top, because I like that better. So I'm gonna have mine flush with the top. It doesn't really matter, actually, where this one is gonna go. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with my screws, and I'm gonna wanna make sure that I'm offsetting these so that it's running through. So I'll probably put 2 in this one. Like that. And I'm gonna just get all these set so I can screw them all in together. Actually, I'm gonna do something this side too.
You just have to make sure that they don't run into each other.
Yeah, you want to make sure that they're not running into each other. Totally. So yeah, you can just kind of slightly offset them, and the corners, you know, not a super big corner, so you'll be able to see it all. All right, so I'm flush with my top again. That's not super important. But... Okay, so I don't know if you can kind of see on that corner, but on the outside, just how the screws are slightly offset.
You didn't see that one.
Yeah. And my support here started to crack on the top. That is because I have a knot on this wood that I didn't see. So if you're nailing or drilling into a knot, it's gonna be more likely to break your wood, or if it's a nail, it's not gonna go in. So I would actually probably take that out and put in a new support. If it's already cracking now, it's not really adding a whole lot to the structure. So kind of annoying, but we want it to be sturdy. So then from the inside, this is what my support would look like. Just a small brace in the corner, pretty out of the way. I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on my other side really quick. Is anybody building a garden bed? Besides Tracy?
I was going to say me.
anybody coming to work with Habitat on the garden bed?
I think we're going to turn it into a volunteer opportunity. I just haven't quite figured out the specifics yet.
Sweet. Alright, so now I got my second layer in, and tie it in at that corner, which is nice. And then I would do same thing with my other corner support. A lot of video of me screwing a bunch of stuff together. And this would be a great buddy project if you have a COVID safe buddy to help pull all these little things.
Yeah, I'm helping out a lot right now.
Right, I'll do one thing to start. Okay, so this would continue for the rest of our box, 2 layers up, and here from the, I don't know if you can tell from the outside as much, but you can see it, the other bow in this wood. Let me show it from the side. So here, this board that's pushing in, that's a slight bow in the wood from my even plane. So over time, that's going to push out, which is exactly what we want. You don't want that starting on the inside. So this is, my bed. I would have another board, 2 layers back here, but I'm going to show you this simple kind of top piece that you could put on just to add a little, a little fun to your project. So what I have here is a 2x4. So this one is 3.5 inches wide. And what I've done is cut a 45-degree angle on either side. So I have a 45-degree angle here, same thing at the top. And I have both of my long points on the same side. So this is going to go right on top like this. And your stuff is all good. And it's going all the way point to point. And so basically I'm just going to create like a little frame to go right on the top of this. That is not necessary for your project, but it is cute. So that is one kind of easy thing you could do. And it takes, again, with our 8-foot piece, it takes 3 2x4s. So a pretty simple kind of touch to it. One thing that I actually didn't account for in the cut list that I gave you, Tracy, for this, if you make these pieces 4 feet, then you would have to cut your angled top piece 3 inches longer, because you have a 2x4 on this side, or a 2x6 and a 2x6 on this side. So it's actually adding 3 inches overall to your piece, which is okay, but something to factor into your materials. So I'm going to be at 51 inches. Okay, so when I'm cutting this piece, I'm not sure if everybody got what I was just saying, but my 4-foot piece is in the middle, then my overall end to end on this side is going to be 51. which I'm fine to do tonight because I had some extra lumber laying around. If you wanted it to be exactly 4 inches, then what we would do, instead of cutting this at 4 feet, we would take off 3 inches so that our overall length would be 4 feet instead of our middle board being 4 feet and then plus 1.5 inches on either side. So that's the only thing that would change. Everything else would go together the same way. So, so to get my 45, I have a speed square here. It's called a speed square because it makes us a straight square line when we are pushed up on this edge. This is perfect 90-degree from my edge. The other cool part is it has this 45-degree already in it. So I'm going to flip that and I'm going to line this up to my corner because I want my tip starting right at the corner. Go ahead and make my line and then go ahead and cut it. And then my overall length that I want this one at is 51. So again, that would be my 48 plus 3 inches. And then go ahead and cut this with my skill saw. Make sure I'm going to cut this using my speed square. So the other cool thing in my speed square is it's going to help me as a guide for my saw. So sometimes even if you've already used a skill saw, cutting straight is really different than cutting angles. So just to give me some more stability, basically I'm going to make sure my cut here is lined up and then I'm holding this on my board to help guide my saw blade. Here's my 45, and then we're gonna go together just like this. So like this, I get a nice cut on this end. This also helps to hold that corner brace that's on the inside here, and just adds a little bit of fun to it. You could do this on the outside as well if you wanted. So if you wanted your board to be sitting like this, you could do it that way as well. I guess it would be like
A lip on the outside.
yeah, a little lip on the outside versus a frame on the inside. So you could do it like that. You could do it inside how I have it. You don't have to have that at all. You could do, you know, a bigger cap or whatever. You could also do this with not 2x4 lumber. So if you wanted to use lumber that looks like this, it's a little bit smaller. I think this is almost an inch. So you could do kind of a thinner lumber if you wanted. This is kind of variation in this, but this is kind of your standard 4x8 box with a little bit of fun stuff added in. You could also stain these or paint these if you wanted. So you could do, you know, a coat of white paint and then some fun designs on it, or paint them fun colors. So maybe just the outside so you're not messing with your plants at all. Yeah, that's what else I have more. Yeah, that's mostly what I got. I can talk briefly about prepping your area. So if you were gonna start growing in this and you're putting it right on soil or right on your bed, I would recommend pulling up anything that's there. So if that's grass or, you know, an old garden or weeds, go ahead and clear that area. It's not, you know, it's not going to grow right up through your soil, but basically you don't want anything down there competing for your new plants that are just getting started. You could also put a layer of either cardboard or some kind of weed blocking material on the bottom of it, especially if it's a pretty shallow bed. If those, you know, weeds have a chance of just popping right up through your garden bed, that would be something to kind of start you off to a good point. And then in terms of having a level area, we want to make sure that we're digging out, not propping up. So if I need to raise, if it's this side is too low, instead of raising this side, I don't want to put like rocks under my corner so that it's taller. It's not very stable. I would want to just dig out the ground a little bit on this edge, or add some dirt over here, but don't prep it on like a block or a rock or something. It's just going to sink again, and also it's not very stable. So we want to make sure we're on like a stable level area, and that's also going to have an effect on your water. So if it's not level, you don't want water kind of pooling on one side and sitting on the wood, or not getting to plants on this side. I said that stuff earlier. That's pretty much all I got for building a bed. You would just continue everything the same way. Is go ahead and attach the rest of your corners, cut all your 45s for the rail if you decide to go that option. Questions?
I have a question. So I've seen a lot of raised garden beds that have like the chicken wire around it just to keep things out of it. If you were going to add chicken wire to your raised garden bed, is there anything you need to do in the construction to allow for that, or is that kind of an after fact?
I think you would just do that afterwards. Yeah, because basically you would want to build your bed, put it there, and then kind of cover it or surround it in your chicken wire. And if you wanted to, I guess one thing you could do is with these corner braces, if you know you're going to be adding in wire, you could extend these corner braces just taller, so you have something to kind of wrap your chicken wire to. But you don't necessarily need to do that. You could add a stick on the outside and surround it that way. Yeah, your regular box and rail or whatever would go the same way, I think.
Okay. I have another question. What type of wood are you using? Sarah joined late, so I think she might, and I don't honestly remember what you said.
What kind of wood? I have 2x4s. I think this is fir. It's
Fir?
just the regular stud material that's at Lowe's. I think most of it's fir. Some of that might be regional dependent, but yeah, whatever your common lumber is. So all the stuff that's not pressure treated, it's all at Lowe's. Is all the same kind of wood. I think it's fir. If you wanted to, you could do cedar wood, which in the Pacific Northwest would be easier to find. So cedar is more resistant to water, but it's not pressure treated with chemicals. So that would be an alternative. That's not going to mess with your plants, but will give you a little bit more life. It is more expensive, similar to the pressure treated, but it looks really nice and it smells really good. So that would be another alternative wood choice to use.
Great. Sarah also chatted that it's been a great tutorial and she's excited to make her first garden bed. Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
That's a picture when you got plants growing in it.
Yeah, I do. And Caitie's definitely a wealth of knowledge. Any other questions from anybody specifically about this and garden beds, what we're doing here? Going once, going twice. Okay. Well, for anybody new joining us, Caitie does lead a couple sessions a month. The next one we've got coming up in mid-August, I think August 19th. Is that the landscaping one?
Yeah, that's landscaping. So we'll go through kind of similar related stuff to this one. I don't know quite what yet, but I'm going to go through how to put down some irrigation, maybe some weed blocking stuff, talk about mulching, some fertilizing. So
yeah, great.
Join us if you can.
Flooring coming up after that. So
Yep. Yeah, flooring's going to be another good one. I'm excited. We've got new topics.
Kim is asking, which way do the cups go? So, well, I mean, it's physics. I can explain this one. I'm going to jump in here and make sure I got it right. So it's basically you're going to have dirt, which is really heavy, on the inside of your garden box, which is going to be pushing out. So if you think about it in terms of physics, you want the cups on the inside, so that when the dirt is pushing against it, it'll bend it out. If the cups are on the outside, then the dirt pushing against it will just weaken that even more, make your wood bend. Did I get it right?
Yeah, totally. Couldn't have said it better myself, Tracy.
And then if it's lengthwise.
And then if it's lengthwise,
yeah.
Right. If you have a crown, I always think of it as crown up. So the part that's sticking up goes up, or like a crown on your head, you want that one on the taller side, the upper side of the board.
Right. So think of it as gravity and pressure. What'll make it break or what won't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the more scientific one. It's just not with the crown.
All right. Any other questions from anyone here? Are we good? Okay. So this will be, this video will be sent to you in a link tomorrow. So if you've participated in this, we've been videotaping this, and we will send it tomorrow. And then you'll have it for reference in the future. You can watch it frame by frame. There's also going to be a link to a quick survey. So if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to fill out the survey and, let us know what you liked, what else you'd like to see for future topics. We'd really appreciate that. So, and we'll also send you a link to Women Build if you want to make a donation to keep our program going. We'd appreciate it. So we only fund this program through donations. So if you can help us out, we'd appreciate it. All right. Thanks so much. Thanks, Caitie. Thanks, Caitie and Michaela. Thanks everybody for joining us, and y'all have a good night.
Night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.